despite it being the shortest month of the year, I read the same number of books in February as I did in January. Hey everybody, it's Jade, and this is my February wrap-up video. So this is everything I read in the month of February. I read 6 books, and I'm gonna talk to you about them now. Okay, the first book I read, I'm doing that because it's also the first DNF of 2023, was something that is possibly also going to be the biggest disappointment of 2023, because I was really looking forward to this book, and I mean, the fact that I DNF'd it should tell you that I was just very much not enjoying it. And that is Plain Bad Heroines by Emily M. Danford. This is like a 600-page book, and I did DNF quite early on. I was like nearly 100 pages in. That tends to be my like criteria of if I've read 100 pages and I'm like really not enjoying it, I'm not going to force myself to read anymore. This is one of those that it should, like on paper, it should have been right up my alley. It's, from what I gathered, having not read that much of it, it was supposed to be sort of like a thrillery horror type thing that jumped between 2 time periods. So it's all centred around this school for girls that was closed down in the 1920s. After a bunch of girls died there. And then in modern times, a film is being made about these tragedies at that location, and it's like things start reoccurring again. I never got to the recurrence part, mainly because the main reason I DNF this is that the narrator's tone, or like the voice of the narrator, was so goddamn annoying that it threw me out of immersion almost constantly. I kept reading it and I was like, I don't know if it's just badly written or if it's the way it's written is something that I don't enjoy. It's also, this has something in common with another book that I rated 1 star and absolutely despised, which was Forgive Me, Lennon Peacock, in that it does footnotes. And now, footnotes aren't always a bad thing. In fact, Terry Pratchett does a lot of footnotes in his books, and he's one of the only people that I've read where I've enjoyed that. In things like this, and Forgive Me, Lennon Peacock, it just throws me out of the immersion. It's just pointless, in my opinion. In this, it doesn't add anything. All it does is remind you that you're reading a book. And I don't like the fact that the narrator of this kept breaking the 4th wall because it wasn't done well. I don't think 4th wall breaking works as well in books as it does in like movies and things. So was addressing us as like reader and things like that, but at the same time felt like I was being talked down to, and yeah, considering how big it is, I was just not willing to put in the time to go through this when I was just being exasperated the entire time. So that is very sad because I was really looking forward to this. The second book I read, which was another one that I've been wanting to read for ages, and thankfully this one delivered a lot more. This was a 4-star read for me, and that is These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. I didn't realise that this was actually a duology, so I need to get the second one. This is a Romeo and Juliet retelling set in Shanghai, and it's rival gangs. I mean, Romeo and Juliet, if you look into it, is like a gang story anyway. But the like romantic backstory, as in like the whole Romeo and Juliet main plotline in the Shakespeare play, takes a back seat in this, and it is much more of a supernatural thriller. And I really enjoyed it. I really liked the twists on the characters. Like, I could still pick out who was who. Obviously you have Juliet and you have Roma instead of Romeo, and so they're both heirs and of the different gangs in Shanghai. You have the Scarlet Gang, who are natives to Shanghai and have been there for generations, and then you have the White Flowers, who are Russians, but have been there for also a couple of generations. Enough for the feud between them to not be super understood, other than the fact that they're rival gangs and they want to take over each other's territory, so that's also understandable, but there's a lot more to it that we don't know about. But anyway, this book starts with Juliet returning from, she's been sent abroad to like school in America for 4 years, and she returns, and just as she returns and starts trying to take up the mantle of her father's heir, people start getting this kind of madness that causes them to tear out their own throats, and so she has to team up with Roma, because it's happening to like both of their families, and try and figure out what is causing this, because if they don't team up together, then like there's gonna be no city for them to rule, type thing. It was gory in like in the best way. Chloe Gong was really good at fleshing out this version of Shanghai, this 1920s version of Shanghai. It felt really real and visceral, all of the descriptions and stuff. Like you could almost like smell when they're near the canals and like going into like these seedy back rooms and stuff like that, and I really enjoyed it. The next book I read was a 5-star, so we're definitely, I feel like this year is already, in terms of reading, shaping up to be better than last year, so because I've already got 3 5-stars under my belt, and I've discovered now a new favourite author. Like I really want to buy loads more of his books, and this is A Man Called Uwe by Frederick Buckman. This one was a Storygraph genre challenge pick, which was, let me get the specific prompt for it. Okay, this was a contemporary or literary fiction novel with disability rep. That's what I put this to. Yep, so I gave this 5-star. Loved Frederick Buckman's writing style. This was I did not anticipate the emotions that this book evoked in me, because on the surface this follows the story of Uwe, who is like stereotypical crotchety old man, like get off my lawn kind of man, whose wife has very recently passed away, so he's now found himself alone and is struggling how to deal with that. And and as you're following him, you're finding out why he's the way that he is in a few like flashback scenes that again gut-wrenching, and also finding out that he's really not as bad as he comes across as. Yeah, he's grumpy, but if you have people that are willing to look past that to see you for who you are and everything like that, they'll give you reasons to keep on living and things. And yeah, it was just lovely. Lovely and also incredibly frustrating because of the things that he's had to like battle against. Because there's a lot of disability rep in this actually. His wife was a paraplegic, and so a lot of like things that he had to like battle through legally to be allowed to keep his wife in their home and not have her sent off to like another like a care home type thing, to get her place of work to allow her to keep working despite the fact she was in a wheelchair and things like that. So you have that disability. Uwe himself has a congenital heart defect. A frenemy, I'm going to say, a long-term frenemy of his has Alzheimer's, and just like everyone is, all of the characters in this are incredibly three-dimensional and well-written, and I love the way they all interact with each other, and yeah. So I want to. I don't know which Frederick Buckman book I want to read next, but I know I want to read more of his writing style because it's just, it's really funny, which then sort of disguises the fact that you're going to get a gut punch at some point. Like you've got these like quippy lines and things that you're reading this from this really crotchety old man's perspective, and that you're agreeing with him a lot of the time. You're like, yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, why don't people do that anymore, or what, and stuff like that. And then it'll just 180 the scene, and you're suddenly like, oh. But I highly recommend that one. Okay, the next book I read, I hadn't picked because it fit with the prompt from my genre challenge, but then I found out later, I was like, actually no, that does. So I picked this as my non-fiction history book about an LGBTQIA issue or person. And that is They Called Us Enemy by George Takei. This was another 5-star, I think. Let me just double check that. Nope, 4-star. But probably closer to a 4.5. This is a graphic novel written by George Takei about his time as a young child in one of the American concentration camps that came about during World War II. That, for those who don't know, after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, all Japanese Americans were either deported or put in these concentration camps. Because of pure racism is the reason, the same as the Muslim ban that Trump put in place when he was a president, which is actually referenced in this book near the end. Literally, the reasoning that the American government gave was that all Japanese Americans, despite the fact whether they were first generation immigrants or if they'd been born in this country, none of them are true Americans. They're all enemies. They're all loyal to the emperor and we can't trust that they're not gonna betray the people around them in this war. So they have to be locked up for the good of the country. Just completely illogical, stupid reasonings. But so it follows his story. He was about 6 or 7 when he was first taken into the concentration camp, and then was about 10 or so when they finally got out. And so it's a story of things he was telling from his perspective as a small child compared with the reality of what was going on. So when they were first put on the train and taken to this place, because his parents didn't want him and his siblings to worry, they were told we're going on a holiday, it's exciting. His mother had packed sweets and everything in the bag to get them through the journey, which was days long. So as a child he remembers it as a big adventure. And obviously for his parents, they were terrified. They didn't know what was going to happen, whether they were going to make it out at the end, and some of the conditions that they were put in, when they were first taken to a place, because obviously there weren't concentration camps built at that point. They were taken to an old racing stables, and that's where they lived, was in a stable. They were each given a stall as families, and that's where they lived for a year and a bit or something. And then they were taken to one that had been built specifically for that. And it was just reading about I wasn't super as someone who lived in England, I'm not super well educated on what was happening in America during World War II, because my history lessons were focused on what happened in this country and stuff like that. But yeah, it was enlightening, and yet also as I'm reading it, I'm I could see, obviously I could see that happen because it did happen, but I'm also it doesn't really surprise me. But also the art style is just lovely. I think it's really cute, considering what the subject matter is. Yes, another highly recommended book. Okay, next book I read, more like a novella, because it's only 60-something pages long, was Address Unknown by Cressman Taylor. I gave this a 3-star only because it is so short, so I feel the subject matter that it was tackling, I understand why it was done in a short, sort of punchy way, but I would have almost preferred it to be slightly longer and gone a bit more in depth. Address Unknown is written as a series of letters between 2 longtime friends. Hold on, what were their names? You have Max and, is it Martin? Yes. So Max is a Jewish man living in New York, running a fairly successful art gallery, and his business partner Martin is, I think they're both German born, but Martin has gone back to Germany in just before Hitler takes power, so like 1932. There we go. So Martin is not Jewish. He is Gentile, and you can, and it's through this series of letters. They start off very friendly. They've known each other for a long time. They're talking about their families, what's going on, like, and then as Hitler's rising to power, you can see the propaganda and the indoctrination happening to Martin in his responses to Max, and saying like, well, we can't be friends anymore, we can't, like, I can't be fraternizing with Jewish people, and like spouting the hypocrisy and the propaganda that Hitler was saying, like, well, yeah, it's just in your nature as Jewish people to be this and this and this, and I think that might have been the fact that, because obviously I wasn't there when this happened, but the indoctrination seemed to happen very quickly. Like, it went from one letter to the next was suddenly a drastic change in tone, and I would have thought it would have felt slightly more realistic for it to have been slightly more gradual. But this was actually written either during or very close to the end of World War II, and was therefore, like, in Germany it wasn't allowed to be printed, it was banned. It was one of the banned books, and then when it was printed again in like the 1940s, it became like a massive bestseller. So I would still recommend it. It's like I said, it's only 60 pages, I got through it in a night. I would personally have just preferred it to have been slightly longer. And the last book I read was because I'm now part of 2 book clubs. I have my general book club that came about during COVID, where me and my roller derby team wanted to do something work so we could still stay in touch, because we weren't allowed to train together, obviously, because it's a contact sport. So a lot of us like reading, so we decided to have a book club. We've got that book club, and then the book club that I just joined, this was my first month with it, which specialises in horror, light fantasy, sci-fi, and one other genre thing. Anyway, the pick for this month was Misery by Stephen King. And this is actually the first Stephen King novel I have ever read. I gave it a 4-star. I understand why he is so popular. He is a very good writer. Not super okay with the quite rampant sexism and the prolific use of rape metaphors, which apparently are 2 things that appear in a lot of his books, so I will tread lightly going forward. I'm also not particularly happy with this copy of this book that I bought. Like, this is like brand new pretty much, and as I was reading it, this happened. Like, this is a brand new book, so I am very possibly going to be contacting the publisher of this specific version of this book and having a little bit of a complaint, because that shouldn't happen with a brand new book. But I watched the movie Misery quite a few years ago, and I really enjoyed it. I really like Kathy Bates as an actress anyway. It was fun to see the page, like, I haven't put it back in properly. And it was nice to see, or fun to spot, like, the differences as you're reading it. The book is a lot more graphic, and that was something I thought Stephen King does really well. I mean, again, first one I've ever read, but I will be reading more of his stuff. There are a few ones that I'm just not going to read, like I'm probably not going to read it. But I have The Stand on my shelf, and I've been wanting to read that for a while, but it's such a big book that it's just a little bit intimidating. But yeah, I had quite a few face journeys and visceral reactions to certain scenes in this. For example, the premise of Misery is that you have a popular author called Paul Sheldon who gets caught in a snowstorm and totters his car, and during that car crash has his legs and pelvis and everything shattered, and he is rescued by an ex-nurse named Annie Wilkes, who also happens to be his #1 fan, who also, as well as being his #1 fan in a fanatical sense, just happens to be just like the winciest bit crazy. That premise felt very, considering when this was written, felt very ahead of its time, considering the online fanaticism of fans now. but just the descriptions of the pain that he's going through and the addiction he gets to the painkillers that she's giving him, and then at one point she like flips and she punches, because she's a very strong woman who lives on a farm by herself. She punches his shattered kneecap. She like runs at him and punches it, and let me tell you, the like face I made when I read just that bit, and just like, yeah, very good at the considering the fact that this is one of his thrillers and not one of his horrors, I am like both excited and quite tentative to read what one of his horrors reads like. I feel like I'm not saying anything new about Stephen King. I mean, there's a reason he's super popular. It's because he is a very, very good writer. But yeah, I don't know if this was like the one that I should have started with King, but I enjoyed it. I knew I liked the story anyway. I liked, like I said, I like comparing it to the movie. I enjoyed his writing style. It was very easy to read, despite the fact that there were times where I was like, and just making faces and feeling like the limbs that were being abused in this, like I could feel the tingles in my own limbs. Yes, it was very good. Right, so those are all the books I read in February. Like I think fairly even mix of ones that I really, really didn't like and ones that I really, really did. Have you read any of the books on that list? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Leave a comment and let me know. Follow me on Goodreads if you want to see what I'm reading like as I'm reading it. I also have a Bookstagram account which I will try and remember to link in the description. As always, be kind to yourself and be kind to others, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!